Hi guys, it's Luton here, back for another episode of On the Level with me and LevelCap, and unsurprisingly today we're going to be talking about Battlefield 4. Now, a lot of people have spoken about how Battlefield 4 is not really a major leap forward from Battlefield 3, but we're hoping that we can shed some light on some of the elements in the game and the kind of wider implications that they have. So Level, what's one of the first things, or what's your first thoughts about the kind of step forward we're making with Battlefield 4?
Well, I think the first of all, the one thing that makes it look like Battlefield 3 is that the visuals look very similar, and a lot of people doing comparison screenshot videos of weapons and stuff like that early on when the trailers were coming out, and noticing that models were identical, all that sort of thing. So everybody was like, "Oh, they're just repackaging Battlefield 3," but apparently Battlefield 4 has actually been under development pretty much since Battlefield 3 has been under development. They've sort of split off teams and started working on BF4 concepts independently. And they've really overhauled not only the whole user interface system, which needed a big upgrade. I think anybody who's played BF3 can say it's a pain in the butt selecting weapons, spawning on your teammates, that sort of thing. All of that has been upgraded. Yeah. But it's the minute changes, I think, really, that are going to push Battlefield into a whole new realm of what the experience is going to be like online.
And I mean, when I was looking at my overview of the video about Battlefield 4, one of the main things that I noted about was the five-man squad, and it hasn't had as much attention, I think, predictably, as some of the other elements that have been noted. But five-man squad for me is like a critical change. It's been so long that we've had four-man squads for Battlefield, and I think having having a fifth person in there really will change things up. Just give you so much more flexibility with what you can do with a squad, make an individual squad a lot more powerful, and then also it links very specifically into the way that they've changed the perk system now, and the fact that you're going to have 5 people, the classes that you can run within that squad means that you don't need to probably run with so many assault players, medics. You can run in a completely different way, and it means that your ability as a squad to be more adaptable or more specific to a certain role on a certain map, depending on what objective you're trying to play towards, it's going to really change things around. I mean, from your experience so far, how did you feel five-man squad changed up from the what we have right now?
I think it was a really cool way to play, and you don't wipe as much. I mean,
yeah,
everybody's been in a four-man squad that's gotten decimated on some sort of rush, assault, push. You all turn a corner and you get blown up or mowed down or whatever. It's not that hard to take out 4 guys, but honestly, adding that one extra guy on there to 5 really does give you a much longer longevity. So you can keep your squad up and running for a long period of time, and it'll help you push objectives more intensely, and it's going to really emphasize staying alive as a squad with the new perk system. So that's going to be a huge aspect of gameplay. So no longer will it be like, oh man, squad wipes, let's spawn back at the point and grab a Jeep or something. It's going to be like, oh crap, our squad wiped, all our perks are gone. Yeah. It's going to be a big deal now. So I'm looking forward to that really intense moment where you realize there's only one guy left in the squad and everybody's sort of holding their breath to see if he can survive and you can get the spawn off, because that's going to be a really big deal, not just for casual play, but imagine the competitive play, which we know is going to spring up because of the new Spectator mode system.
But I mean, the perk system as well, I think we should clarify a little bit there. People will know already, but for people that don't know the perk system, it is changing quite fundamentally. When I spoke to Deskro about it, he mentioned that when he was playing, getting a lot of kills didn't really equate to racking the perk bar up very much. So he said he was getting like a lot of kills, and it didn't translate particularly into actually scoring up your perk bar. And I think what he was trying to say is that they've tried to emphasize more towards, okay, if you want to really sort of gain success with your squad, you need to actually play for the things that will give you objective points in the game, not necessarily focusing on just racking those kills all the time. And
not to cut you off, but I spoke with the dev about it, and it was specifically focused on squad teamwork points.
Yeah, exactly.
So any points that benefited your squad specifically would start to rank up the points. So it's emphasizing you to stay together with your squad if you want those benefits.
Yeah, and dropping stuff like ammo, I assume, and, you know, rezzing people back up, things like that, yeah?
Exactly, yeah.
So they're focusing on that team play again. They really are trying to focus it. And I think they are kind of feeding back from what people have said. I think they've listened and looked at what the community wanted. A lot of people are always complaining about how there's too many lone wolves in Battlefield, but I mean, at the end of the day, that's a way people can play if they want to. But what they're doing is saying, look, if you actually play together as a team and a squad, you will get extra benefits. It doesn't mean that you can't play however you want to play, but it means that if you do play like that, you do get more benefit from it. But I think the other thing, something that I have spoken to other producers about already who were at E3, and I have a few concerns about some of the changes that were made there, specifically with the perks thing. Now, when you were playing, when you actually experienced it, did you feel that the perk system was too overpowered? Like when a squad had maybe been alive for a long time, they had that full perk ability, do you think it really gave them a strong edge? Or did it just give them more of a kind of, you know, a slight edge in certain situations?
I really don't think it gave them anything overpowered. You're not going to run into a guy with a fully ranked up squad and be like, why aren't my bullets killing him? Your bullets are going to kill him just fine. If you run into your average firefight, you're going to be pretty much equal. I think one of the biggest benefits you can get from a full ranked up squad is the healing rate starting sooner after you take damage is one of the cooler ones from assaulting. But even then, in a basic firefight, it's not going to make a difference. So all the upgrades you get, for the most part, aren't going to change your average one-on-one firefight too much. The suppression resistance will probably help out a bit also, but it's really not going to be like, oh, it's overpowered, man, it's super overpowered. It's just going to be some nice perks. The extra ammo, the extra grenades, that sort of thing is going to be really helpful in the long run, but you're not going to be Iron Man walking around, or Terminators or anything like that.
I think that's good to hear, because I think from what I'd heard from a few people, there were some concerns that, okay, you know, if you have one squad that's just alive all the time, they're just going to dominate. Although I'd argue if they've managed to stay alive for such a long time, they're probably going to be dominating other people
they're
anyway.
Already dominating.
Yeah, you know.
They're already.
But I mean, one other thing with the perks, I mean, so we could only see at E3 a couple of choices.
Whatever you want to run with, you can. If you want defensive tree, you can run with the defensive tree. If you want the offensive tree, you run with the offensive tree. They only have defensive and offensive trees in the game so far. And they'll probably have a bit more.
I was interested whether they have like a customizable one, like when you maybe get to a much later rank, you then can select a fully customizable tree.
I don't think that's going to be an option. What they might have is, as you rank up, they might give you some more interesting trees to pick from. But at the moment, it does just seem to be offensive and defensive. I hope that gets. I hope they.
Would you want to see a customizable one? Would you want to see that?
I don't think we need to see it really. I think. I'm fine with them picking the order to rank up, because some of the abilities are considerably better, so I think a lot of people would pick those as their very first abilities. And definitely. Since you always get your very first ability, it would just be like, here's the order that's best to use for everyone. So by having customized ones to pick from, then you can't just say, okay, I'm starting with ammo in the start, or I'm starting with health regen as my first. Like, I have a feeling almost everybody would pick that one if that was an option.
That is actually a really, really good point, and for that reason, I hope that they don't provide a customizable option, because I had kind of thought earlier, I was like, yeah, you know, it'd be kind of cool to be able to choose the ones you want, but then I'm not thinking in that same mindset of like, yeah, I must pick the elite option and I will have nothing else, because that's just not how I play the game. But yeah, that would be the way people go.
Think like the average player. Every average player is going to want the biggest advantage as possible. But we should talk about the other differences between the upgrades from Battlefield 3 to Battlefield 4. One of the big ones, obviously, is Spectator mode, which I think could launch Battlefield 4 into a serious competitive area with esports. What do you think?
The guys have been asking about this forever, to have a spectator mode. It's been something people have been literally crying for, to the point that, well, I've got to say Dasco, because he's the main guy pushing all this stuff, really. There's a level Battlefield, etc. But I mean, Dasco is such a massive force behind competitive, and you know, he's been obviously going on about this. Now, they've even managed to get their own spectator program working with Battlefield 3.
Too. It looks so honestly a little bit better than the one with Battlefield 4.
It is true, but I mean, mean, Battlefield 4, we're right still at the alpha stage. But I mean, yeah, it looks really good that they've actually tried to put this in. They're going to put this in. I think I heard that it was only going to be for PC originally, though. Is that correct? I think I heard that.
Can't confirm on that, but that does sound right, just because the controls seem to really favor the PC side of things.
Yeah, from what I heard, the Spectator was going to be PC, as far as I had heard, but that's obviously open to change. But more importantly, it does open things up hugely for competitive, and this was an element that was required. They needed it really to be a proper effective force in the competitive world for FPS. So this is such good news for all those guys, and I think with the hugeness that will be Battlefield 4, I think that is like an important component, and if they didn't have that, I think it would really, really, you know, make things just fall apart for the competitive side anyway. So it's an awesome thing that they're bringing in, but just for other people as well, not just for competitive. It's an enjoyable thing to have in the game. It's just another thing that adds a whole sphere of enjoyment for people. It gives them loads of options. They can watch their friends, they can learn from other people. But I think the battle recorder element is something that's kind of been not sort of spoken about. Not sure whether they're really going to go ahead with that. But I mean, what's your thoughts about Spectator?
I think it's going to be great for YouTubers also. You know, I'm already thinking about like, wow, so I could have a camera guy following me around, or getting a third-person view on firefights and stuff like that. I mean, imagine the Squad Up series with somebody who could fly a camera around our squad moving around and showing us like invading a building, and then you cut to the inside shot, and then we're leaving the building, you cut to the outside shot. You can show tanks approaching, the overall scope of the battle. It could just make YouTube videos and that sort of thing much more interesting. So I'm very excited for that on my front, and I think overall it's just going to make the game much more attractive to watch.
Yeah, I think I said, like, for the community in general, it's going to be a really good thing. And for YouTube, again, specifically, I mean, with the kind of stuff that I do, where I look at tactical elements in the game and how a game unfolds. So you're looking at the gameplay as it happens. Okay, where are certain squads moving to? At what point do you lose a certain objective? What's those kind of key turning points in the game? Now, when I'm recording, obviously it's only from my perspective, so if something happens over here on the other side, that's no good for me at all. But if I, for example, have my own server up and I can spectate that server, if I have the right kind of players in the game, which I generally would do, I can kind of move around, spectate, and it allows you to provide a really, really interesting commentary, and you can provide so much more of a sort of valid content for the community. So I think that's a really exciting thing. I think it's great all around. It's great for people playing the game. It's great for sort of people producing content in the community. So looking forward to that massively. You mentioned about vehicles in the game and how they have changed around a little bit. Now there's certain things like tanks, for example, you have to hit those tracks in order to get the disables. That's quite a nice little change. You mentioned a little bit about the kind of momentum for air vehicles and so on and so on. Now it kind of makes me wonder whether they've tried. I've always said that it kind of frustrates me that some air vehicles can kind of pull off these stupid maneuvers, which they don't really sort of fit into the realistic world of physics. And for that reason, it's not abusing it, because people are able to do it and they have the kind of ability to do it. But I always felt like, that helicopter or jet would not really be able to pull that maneuver. It kind of irritated me that they could.
Yeah, flying 20 miles an hour and doing a strafe run or something.
Do you feel like they've changed it for that reason? And is that kind of how it felt to you? Obviously, there weren't any jets in the gameplay that you were in, but I mean, overall, just as a principle, do you feel it's going that way?
I think it's good because I think they feel more realistic. And I did crash the helicopters quite a bit when I first popped into them, because I'm just like, I'm going to pull an awesome banking maneuver in the middle of the city. And it's like, nope, you got too much momentum. You're going to slam into that skyscraper. And so it was a little bit of a learning curve, but it reminded me of older Battlefield games where I feel like they had a slightly more realistic flying engine, and they might have pulled away from that to make it a little more arcadey and accessible to more people. But I kind of like the more difficult aspect of flying, and at the same time, I think if they apply the same weird momentum system to, say, jets, they're not going to be able to do the same kind of cheapo, super slow strafe runs, and they're going to have to probably be faster moving. The vehicle physics with tanks and jeeps feels much more spot on now. In one of Jack's Frags videos, a jeep's going around a corner real fast, and it goes up on two wheels, and then it goes back down. And they put a lot more attention to the vehicle physics, and relating to vehicle physics and the netcode. A lot of people probably are familiar with trying to drive a vehicle next to another vehicle in Battlefield 3, and
Yeah.
everything just wigging out because for some reason the game can't handle that. I think they've gone in and they're trying to deal with that as best as possible. So a lot of stuff is under the hood with Battlefield 4 versus Battlefield 3. Visually, it might look pretty similar in a lot of ways, but a lot of the devs were asking me how I felt, how the game felt in terms of tightness and like what they thought the improvements on the netcode were going to apply to the new game. And they couldn't be specific on what they changed. They just wanted to know what I felt about the new feel of it. And so I know they've really been tinkering with stuff under the hood, trying to tighten up the gameplay, trying to tighten up the physics, probably the netcode a lot, you know, reduce the dying behind corners, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be probably one of the biggest differences between BF3 and BF4, and it will be under the hood. So unless you're intimately familiar with Battlefield 3, you're probably not going to notice the tiny nuances as much, but you will experience them as the overall experience, and it'll be a much more solid and fluid experience.
Yeah, and you know, for all people say about how it doesn't really look that different, for me it did actually look pretty different. And I think you actually mentioned about this, was that when you were in game, that kind of street fighting aspect, it felt like it looked more kind of cinematic, a bit more realistic, the kind of way people would move, like running point to point. And all the gameplay that I have watched, it has the Battlefield feel, it has Battlefield 3, it has a Battlefield 3 look and feel to it, but it's got something else as well. And I think a lot of it is to do with the kind of coloration choices. Also, I noticed that kind of a lot of perspectives, the way you look down through streets and so on, they kind of have this more kind of diffused. There's a lot more kind of particle smoke and things just kind of flowing around. Now
Yes.
that may be specific just to this map, but I think it's kind of indicative of a kind of more general move that they've made to try and make all these kind of environments feel a bit more atmospheric. And, you know, there was some moments where you were behind some concrete bollards, and then you see this guy, and he goes for a run across the street, and off he goes, he's running, and you're tracking him. That felt very much like a sort of cinematic film to me, like when you see an enemy soldier in a film, and he goes running for it, and the guy drops him or whatever. It felt very much like that to me, whereas in Battlefield 3 I always felt it's been more like, there's a guy, but in this it was more like, you just felt a bit more immersed in the game. So
Absolutely.
I mean, you tell the guys, because you've played the game, does it feel like that to you, and why do you think it feels like that to you?
They've upped the particle physics quite a bit in the game. That's apparent from the start, because when you're looking at a screenshot or like a little trailer, you're comparing what's the same. But when you actually get into the game, all of a sudden, it's very hard to put your finger on it unless you've got like a really good artistic eye and you can notice every tiny little detail that's changed. But everything about the environment in terms of particles and stuff has really been upgraded. I was talking to people about how when you fire RPGs in Battlefield 4, your screen blurs out and there's a massive smoke trail and sparks and all this stuff. You can't just fire an RPG and then dive behind a rock. You're going to fire an RPG and be a little bit dazed and confused. Like the first time I shot one, I was like, whoa, I can't even see my target anymore. Like this totally messed me up. And it like changed the environment of firing RPGs. It's no longer this video game rocket that you kind of just shoot and then reload, shoot and reload. It feels much more impactful. And I think one of the things that didn't come across in the live stream at E3 at all is the sound upgrades. The environmental sounds were amazing. And Battlefield 3 has already won numerous awards for having like one of the coolest sound engines ever. Like that was one of the big things people were raving about when the game came out. Battlefield 4, I don't know how they did it, but they've upgraded it like way beyond what it was, to the point where I was running around in game, and even though I was in a really loud E3 environment, it was still incredibly immersive with picking out individual bullets that were like whizzing past my head. They had different sounds for different projectiles colliding with different kinds of materials, and all of a sudden I just felt like I was able to understand exactly what was happening around me in terms of like how many bullets are flying past me, where they're impacting, all this stuff. It just sounded crazy, and the sounds were much more, I think, sharp and almost threatening. So you felt like you're in the middle of a giant battle, which it's hard to explain how that's different from Battlefield 3, because they do that really well in Battlefield 3. It's just, I'm not an audiophile guy, so I can't use that lingo, but it's just better on all fronts. Like, I can promise everybody that once they hear Battlefield 4, it's going to kind of blow your mind.
I think I totally noticed this as well. Like, when I was watching gameplay back, just from, for example, weapon firing, if you go after this video to some gameplay of Battlefield 4, then go to Battlefield 3, just listen to how the firing of weapons sounds. There is many subtle differences in the way the rounds sound when they're flying out of the gun, and just kind of distant sounds and so on and so on. So they really kind of have just filed and filed down. I think that's what we're seeing with Battlefield 4, is just this ultra refined version. So, you know, if you want to be really pedantic about it, yeah, okay, people can go, oh, it's Battlefield 3.5. But it's not, because what they've done is taken the kind of core foundation of Battlefield 3 and really polished it right back until they've got this excellent product. And I think from what we can see and what we can hear and the feedback that everyone is given, that's really what we're looking at. I think something that I would note out of this as well is that it feels to me very much like you say with the RPG firing, and for example when the guy is spotting targets, they see, and with the whole squad element going on, it seems to me that they've kind of tried to pull things back away a little bit from the kind of slightly twitchy gameplay to a little bit more. They've tried to slow things down a bit,
make
but
you
keep
think
things,
about your actions before you do them.
Yeah, and the fact that you perform actions actually having a kind of momentary impact on you. We're not talking a massive amount of time, but it's just like you can't like drop something and then you're on to the next job. You know, you have to have that slight interlude where you're kind of like, okay, I have to, you know, you have to actually take time to think about your action, like you say, before you move on to the next thing. I think that's very, that, you know, that sings very true of Battlefield itself. And I think they're kind of bringing it back a little bit towards. I think there may be some people who are thinking, oh, Battlefield 4, it's time to get out the crazy kills. That's all still going to be there. But I think they've tried to bring it back in a slightly different way. And I think the way that they've built the game is going to sort of emphasize that. But moving on, I think we've got to mention one last thing before we finish up here, and it's got to be Commander Mode. Now, you know, it's coming in, it's been talked about a lot, people will know a lot about it already, but for me as well, I've kind of talked a little bit about how I'm mildly concerned about Commander. Does it give too much power in the hands of one player? What happens if you have an extremely good commander and a very bad commander on the same team? What happens if, for example, one team is very dominant? Does it just mean that that team becomes even more unstoppable? I think there's all these kind of things going there. I'd be interested to kind of hear what you think about that, you know, going to Battlefield 4.
Yeah, I have all those exact concerns that you all just mentioned right there. And I actually spoke with a bunch of the devs who are very much in charge of Commander Mode and this sort of concepts there. And they said that they're, you know, very aware of those concerns and they have the same concerns and they're going to try and balance it out so that that doesn't happen. At the same time, I played Battlefield 2 a lot. I mean, I think I've played Battlefield 2 more than any other game aside from Battlefield 3. So I have plenty of memories of crappy commanders ruining a game that would have otherwise been fun. And that's why I wasn't excited for it to come back. And frankly, the implementation of Commander Mode, iPad support aside, is pretty much identical to Battlefield 2. You've got some new stuff in the game now, and capture points control your abilities, which is different. And that might not actually be better. It's a cool addition, and people think, oh, that's neat. Now it becomes more tactical, because if you capture C point, you get the C-130 gunship. Well, that could also be really bad, because now if you have the C point, you also have 3 out of 5 points, and you have an additional epic weapon to dominate those points. So it's just going to be, it could turn into a big steamroll. I'm just afraid of it. I think there's a lot of gimmicky stuff in it. You know, the cruise missile is going to wear off eventually, where people are like, oh man, that cruise missile looked awesome, and it just blew up our whole armored column. You know, after a while, people are just going to be like, fucking cruise missiles, you know, or definitely. Fucking AC-130. Like, everybody's excited now, but I'm waiting for the newness of it to wear off and people thinking like, okay, maybe this wasn't such a great idea. I don't know. I am being super cynical about it, but I also love Battlefield, and I don't want elements coming in to make the gameplay less fun.
I've got to say I'm surprised they brought the AC-130 back because of just how much people... I am kind of surprised, but we'll see how it goes. They did say that certain maps are going to have different, commander abilities. So it's not like the AC is on every map; it's going to be on specific maps. So I think that's kind of interesting. I also think that people have been speculating about, will there be an option to play without commander mode? So will that be an option that is like default? You play like conquest non-commander, conquest commander. I get the feeling it's probably just going to be default. It's going to be there. We've only seen it in conquest. So will commander mode appear in Rush? I'm not sure, because Rush was not in Battlefield 2. So it will be interesting to see whether they decide to run it in that.
Team Deathmatch Commander.
You don't know. You don't know how the maps are going to be for Team Deathmatch. We could have super complex maps with all sorts of stuff going on there, environmental features and stuff. But I don't know. But I think we just need to wait, basically, and see. We need more information. We've had a good little overview at first, but we need some more details, and that's going to come with time.
So just to conclude some thoughts here for anybody who had their doubts about Battlefield 4 just being kind of a slightly upgraded Battlefield 3, from my personal experience playing it, from watching the live stream, from all the new features, I think the game is going to play out completely differently than Battlefield 3. A lot of things are going to feel very familiar, but there's going to be so many new elements on top of the Levolution, of course, which everybody's excited about, that we're going to have a really new title that I don't feel is going to just be sort of a rehash.
Absolutely. And, we're still at the alpha stage. We've got months more content and development to come. Okay, they're going to be pushing through into the beta as well. So there's so much more we're going to learn over the months between now and when Battlefield 4 actually releases, guys. So stay tuned for a lot more sort of discussion, analysis, and give us your thoughts below. Always interested to hear what you guys have got to say. And we'll see you next time for some more On The Level.